Okay, we'd like to welcome everybody today to our curriculum committee meeting, September the 27th, 12 o'clock here at the PDC. We've got all our committee members here. And first thing I need to do, I need to ask for a motion for the approval of the minutes from the August 23rd meeting.
I'll offer a motion to approve.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Before we get into our agenda, is there anybody that needs to amend or add to the agenda? Okay, none being, for the benefit of our people watching on live stream, our first presentation is about the anti-bullying presentation, and we're fortunate enough to have Mr. Steph Gordon Lipkin from the Anti-Defamation League in Washington, D.C., and he's calling in, but the presentation will be seen. And Dr. Houlihan, do you want to say something before we start?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ape and committee members. Throughout the year last year and over the summer, we've talked a little bit about what can we do as a school system that's kind of innovative, kind of unique regarding anti-bullying. October is just around the corner, which is National Anti-Bullying or Bullying Awareness Month. If you'll recall, a year ago is when we released our new app, and we're doing a lot of things around the tip line and giving different ways for folks to report bullying, harassment, etc. And we've been working over the summer and into the fall on something that we could do that's a little bit more student-led around anti-bullying. And I've done work in the past with ADL, and particularly a program called No Place for Hate. And Dr. Faust, Dr. Jones, and I have been working on this, and pleased to have Seth here to give a kind of a high-level presentation as to how we might go about, if we want to, how we as a system might go about becoming a No Place for Hate school system, as opposed to individual schools and having it being a random kind of one-off, which would be, I believe, and Seth can confirm this, the first time in the history of the nation that a school system would go down this route. So I'm excited about the presentation. I think there's a lot of possibilities here. And so we'll turn it over to Seth.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you about how we might be able to build a partnership between ADL and specifically our No Place for Hate program and the public schools in Union County. As was just mentioned, my name is Seth Gordon Lipkin. I'm the Education Director for the Anti-Defamation League in our Washington, D.C. regional office. And the region that I cover as Education Director, it runs from Maryland all the way down to North Carolina. So we are excited about the opportunity to serve your community and to be partners with your school districts in order to make all of the schools in Union County No Place for Hate certified schools. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. But before I dive into a little bit about the program and the history of our organization, I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the conversations that I've already had with Dr. Faust and what we're thinking about in terms of kind of the key factors in why we're looking at the idea of building out a No Place for Hate pilot group for Union County this school year and expanding it over the next several years in order to impact every single school in Union County. And as was just mentioned, I think it's important to note that one of the main goals of our program and of Union County Public Schools is to build sustainable change. We don't want to be working on one-off or quick efforts on fighting bullying and fighting bias in our schools. We want these to be part of long-term conversations that are embedded in the climate and culture of the school communities. That are engaging all the stakeholders in those communities in the process of affecting positive change within their schools and within the walls of those schools. So this program is something that is designed along a lot of the same lines as what the National School Climate Center recommends for how to support positive and safe, inclusive school climates. So I'm going to dive in now a little bit to the history of the ADL and sort of where this program came from, and then turn that attention to what it looks like and how we might be able to implement this in Union County Public Schools. So to start, ADL, we were established in 1913. Over the past 104 years, we've become one of the leading civil rights and human relations organizations in the U.S., with 30 offices in the U.S. and abroad. Our mission, stated in 1913 in our charter, was a two-part mission: to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. And the reason for that was that our founders, when they created this organization, had a keen awareness about the sort of setting in American culture for civil rights organizations. That even though the founders of the ADL were Jewish and that their immediate needs were in responding to an anti-Semitic incident that took place outside of Atlanta, that they knew that in order to work toward advancement of one marginalized community, that it needed to be a universal approach. That justice and fair treatment for all was the ultimate mission of not just the ADL, but of the United States of America, and that those forces needed to work in tandem. So since then, in 1985, ADL shifted its standing from being focused on working with law enforcement to better serve the communities that they work with, and lobbying on Capitol Hill for different civil rights laws. In 1985 in Boston, and then in 1992 nationally, ADL embarked on education programs, opportunities where students could build understanding and respect for one another through conversation and through peer-to-peer leadership. So our education programs, through what's called our World of Difference Institute and through No Place for Hate, address all forms of prejudice and discrimination. They are geared toward understanding the root causes of bias, so that when students of all ages see them and encounter them on an everyday basis, whether it's deeper encounters with discrimination or the everyday sort of bullying that I think most students have been exposed to, that they are equipped with the tools to recognize and respond to those kinds of forces in their school and out in their communities. So in the past 25 years, ADL has trained more than 400,000 teachers throughout the country and impacted millions upon millions of students, not just in the US, but also abroad. No Place for Hate, though, was launched in 1999, kind of coming out of this, as an opportunity to equip schools with an organizing framework to combat bias and bullying. You know, we had an understanding that a lot of schools are perhaps trepidatious about approaching these conversations, don't necessarily have the tools and the resources embedded to make them constructive, and that was where we saw an opportunity for us to help out schools and educators around the country. So since 1999, over 1,700 schools throughout the US and communities have participated in No Place for Hate. And what No Place for Hate is an organizing framework for combating bias and bullying. And the result of it is sort of a good housekeeping seal of approval for schools that are making proactive efforts to address bias and bullying in their communities. So schools go through a series of activities and requirements throughout the school year, and at the end of it, receive a designation that that school is certified as No Place for Hate, and receives a customized banner, which you'll see a picture of later in the presentation, demonstrating to people both within and outside of that school that when you set foot in those halls, that it is a safe and inclusive community for people of all backgrounds. So the way that No Place for Hate works is essentially to bring new and existing programs and initiatives under a unifying message. A lot of times schools might have several different disparate programs or activities that are in some ways related to bias or bullying prevention, but aren't necessarily cohesive. We want to be able to help schools to embed these within the everyday culture of the community. And doing that in order to lead to long-term solutions and sustainable school climate change. So what we try to do is not to provide a quick fix or an assembly program necessarily, but rather to empower the people within in that building, the people who are most directly affected by the everyday in and out of the operations of that school, to give them a voice and give them actionable ways to take a stand against hatred and bigotry in their community. So the process for a school to become a certified No Place for Hate school is sort of a three-step process. After a school has contacted ADL and expressed interest, the first thing that they do is form an advisory committee, which is comprised of the three stakeholder groups at the school: students, staff, and parents. We think it's important to include all of those voices in the conversation that's organizing this program in order to make sure that they are addressing the needs of each of these different groups. So we create, working with the school, a group of about 10 to 15 people from that represent the diversity of the student body and the community that it's being led in, to really champion these efforts and find a way to create a year-round way of implementing anti-bias and bullying prevention programs within the school. So the first thing that the school does is form that committee, and then the committee gathers signatures on what's called our resolution of respect, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. The resolution of respect lays out sort of the values of this program. I will speak out against prejudice and discrimination. I will reach out to those who are targets of hate. Things that we are trying to really enforce as individual responsibilities in combating bias and bullying, in order to make sure that everyone understands the commitment that the school is taking on. So schools sign the resolution of respect, demonstrating their commitment. We, of course, will provide a lot of resources and materials to the school in order to spread awareness and spread the word about these efforts. And then throughout the rest of the school year, this committee that oversees No Place for Hate implementation chooses and completes 3 or more activities that recognize differences and promote respect. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I put the guidelines for what these activities generally entail, that they rely on students in the planning and implementation. Student leadership is such an important thing to ensure buy-in, that they're involving active learning modalities and discussion to try and not just have a presentation and then let it be forgotten, but rather to engage students in conversations around the ways that bias and bullying impact their everyday lives, and the ways that they, as individuals and as a community, can have a unified front in responding to it. So No Place for Hate activities might include things that a school is already doing, such as a multicultural or an international fair, talent shows. Oftentimes that just takes a slight tweak in order to make sure that it fits all those guidelines that we lay out for what a No Place for Hate activity should entail. But the ultimate goal is that these activities are impacting the whole school, not just a select group of students who are choosing to attend, but the whole community. So they can be social media campaigns, they can be guest speakers. It really runs a range, and we provide schools with 30 to 35 sample projects that they can draw right out of our resource guide, or we can consult with them on different creative ideas that they can use in order to work toward their No Place for Hate designation. Really, we understand that fostering a positive school climate is not a one-size-fits-all solution, that every community has its own challenges and its own needs. And we want to be able to provide the resources and the tools and strategies to those communities and to the people that can most effectively create that kind of impact that we're going for with this program. So what we hope to do and what we would like to do as our plan moving forward in order to build out this partnership with Union County would be to launch this year with a small group, pilot group of 10 schools. In our mind, we're thinking what might be great based on the number of schools that you have throughout the county would be to try and get 5 elementary, 2 middle, and 3 high schools signed on board for this year. What we would be able to offer is an organized central training in Union County somewhere to onboard the coordinators in each of those schools, the people who are going to be overseeing those committees and the implementation. And then after 2017, 2018, once these schools have achieved their designation, then we would be able to expand that going forward over the next 3 or 4 years to eventually reach every single school in Union County. We are willing to take on 10 schools right now and then double it next year, add 10 more the year after that, 15 after that, and then achieve all the schools in Union County by 2022 is our goal. So the pilot group would really be dependent on what you all think would be the most effective way to implement this. It can work with feeder patterns in order to kind of get a sense of the continuity as expansion takes place. And we're really willing to work with any collection of schools that you're able to help us get on board. The key to that is always a supportive principal and supportive administration, so that the activities that we need in order to complete this designation are getting the time and attention that they deserve, and having the kind of school-wide impact that we hope to create. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions and clear up anything. I know I've been talking really fast, so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about how this is implemented, what the goals of it are, and what this would mean for the schools that would join in a pilot group this year.
I have a question, Seth. My name's Gary Sy. Can you talk about, you've mentioned to be designated, that there are 3 of the listed activities need to be completed. Can you address more specific items or programs to be implemented for a day in and day out change in the culture of the school towards bullying and hate?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, the activities themselves really vary from school to school. Some of the things that we've seen really effectively implemented have been multicultural fairs, where students are able to kind of spotlight the culture where they or their family comes from, whether that's a culture from another country or a unique culture within the U.S., to try and spread awareness and educate about people's differences. One other activity that I think has been really amazing in several middle schools that we work with is mix it up at lunch day kind of thing, where students are asked to sit with someone that they don't know or haven't met or had a dialogue with, and given a set of discussion questions about their identities and about the ways that they might be different from one another, in order to build bridges of understanding with different people. So they might be asked to do that for one day in a month, or 1 week even in some cases. We've seen at the elementary level schools that have an every year spirit week kind of thing, where in order to, you know, just change it around a little bit to give it a message of diversity and inclusion, would, you know, instead of having Spirit Day where everyone comes in pajamas, for example, the school did last year put a cap on Hate Day, and they had discussions in their homerooms about you know, what it means to be an ally to people who are experiencing prejudice or injustice. So the activities are designed to foster dialogue more than anything else. And that, I think, is what's really powerful about this, is because students, whether we know it or not, are having conversations about these issues. And in order to go about them in a constructive way, it's really beneficial if the school can facilitate them and make sure that the students who are you know, speaking about these things sometimes in private or in hushed voices, that they're welcome conversations, and that in order to build the kind of society that we all aim to live in, that we need to be talking about our differences. I think all too often, you know, people are afraid of discussing those kinds of things, and therefore we don't necessarily know how to go about it. So what we try to do through the materials that we provide to schools, through lesson plans, as well as you know, conversation starters, we try to really enable those dialogues and let students know that these aren't conversations that we need to be afraid of, but rather they take courage in order to make sure that they're constructive.
Well, you answered my question there right at the end. I was looking for specifically drilling down into the classroom, and you mentioned curriculum. So you have information that would be helpful for individual classroom teachers at all the different levels to facilitate discussions on what bullying is and et cetera. Do you provide any assistance to our staff for training for our classroom staff to identify and how to handle any suggestions on procedures and policies, et cetera?
So that, going back just to the final slide about the potential partnership, those would be certainly a focus of whatever centralized training we would put together for the coordinators of this program. So we would definitely want to equip them with some curricular resources in order to foster these conversations in the classroom. In addition, whenever I'm working with schools on these programs, on No Place for Hate especially, we provide an online collection of resources that includes lesson plans about current events, guidelines for how to foster discussions about bias and bullying in the classroom, and also resources for parents and family members to continue those conversations at home as well. So we really understand that, a lot of times teachers might feel like they're kind of thrown into these conversations without a lifeboat or without the right tools. So we really want to be providing as many resources, both lesson plans as well as best practices and guidelines for teachers to use in their everyday lives, in order to ensure that these are becoming sustainable solutions rather than one-off ones. Does that address your follow-up?
Yeah, yes, sir, it does. And I have one last question. What would be the financial commitment on our part to implement your program here?
Well, No Place for Hate is a 100% free program right now. We do have some advanced trainings that, professional development seminars and things like that do have costs associated with them, but No Place for Hate is free. And if we, do build out this pilot group, we'd be able to potentially build in in the next few years some more advanced training opportunities at sort of reduced costs, because of the way that we're building out this kind of pilot group.
Thank you. That's the answer I was hoping for. Great.
Free is always good, right?
Mr. Sides, thank you for that last question, because growing up with a wife and 2 daughters, I always have the question, what's the cost? So you always say things more eloquently than I do.
Well, I thought you were going to say that you were familiar with bullying by growing up with 2 daughters and a wife.
No, it's just what's it going to cost. So, Seth, I'm a retired teacher, and I could see how this would be helpful in school in so many ways, but it's just one more thing to add to the teacher's list. But it would really be, it's sad that we've got to spend time teaching people to be nice to each other, but it's the world we live in.
Right. And I think one of the things that makes No Place for Hate in particular a little more palatable in that sense is that we understand that schools in many cases are doing some bullying prevention efforts already. So we're not necessarily coming in saying, let's reinvent the wheel, but rather what resources do we already have in the school building that can make this something that's easily attainable, rather than something that we're resistant to because of the potential for added commitment. So this can be both, what can we build out that's new activities, new projects around these themes, and also what do we already have in the building that may be able to complement this.
Does any of the committee members or staff, Dr. Houlihan, have anything to say?
Just one of my final comments on this one is, again, the reason why I really like this approach. Number one, you can phase it in over the course of a few years. Number two, a lot of these initiatives and events are student-led. They're student organized. And when you empower your kids to lead that effort, it can make a tremendous difference. The third one, third point I'll make is, you know, right at the beginning through the resolution of respect, what the commitment's going to be. And the fact that you would involve possibly members of your site-based team, parents, kids on that. What I see, we have a lot of schools, to Seth's point, that are doing these kinds of events already. But what I see is they're having a guest speaker come in and just talk to one grade level. And then what about the other grade levels? This is about the entire school and about the entire school's culture. And it impacts every child. And the resources they have, you know, as a former teacher like you, Mr. Rape, I remember having conversations with kids about bullying, but I didn't have a lesson plan to teach them. I didn't have a conversation starter. And that's what a big benefit that we would have through No Place for Hate. So obviously I'm biased. I'm a fan. I think it's got a lot of potential here.
And I just had a thought. I know exactly who could be our boots on the ground, the county student council that we met at the last meeting. That would be a great opportunity for them to get out and talk about their cause, but also that'd be a good first project.
Seth, before we leave you, could you address kind of the mechanics of implementation? Will your organization be able to, will we be graced with a visit from someone, or is this primarily a long distance conversation and back and forth? How do you assist us getting this off the ground?
So it would be a combination. You know, the first thing that we would want to do would be a bit of distance, would be identifying schools and coordinators within those schools. So typically a coordinator, which is the person who oversees the advisory committee, is either a counselor, sometimes a school social worker, or a teacher who just wants to take this on as a charge. Generally, I work with 1 or 2 coordinators per school. Once those coordinators are identified, since we would be really looking at a pretty large group of schools to start off, even at 10 school, you know, that could be between 15 and 30 coordinators even, then what we would want to do and what we would be committed to do in order to make this pilot group successful would be that I would identify a time where we could have essentially a professional development training for the coordinators of this program. So I think, you know, looking in terms of the next several months, if we were able to identify these 10 schools and the coordinators, you know, hopefully by, say, the end of October, then we'd be able to find a date in November where I would personally come down to Charlotte, or Union County, excuse me, and to facilitate a training, whether that's 3 or 6 hours or whatever amount of time we're able to get, in order to really make sure that they understand the ins and outs of how to run the program, and a lot of the kind of content that they're going to be using for it.
Seth, I have one more question I want to ask our superintendent. We're getting ready to sort of modify our professional development center here. Do you know if we will have the possibility of webinars with our new what do you call what we're putting in here?
So webinars are definitely a possibility. So part of No Place for Hate. So as I mentioned, I'm the regional director for it in the DC region, which covers Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina. But it's a larger national movement. So there are periodic webinars organized through our national office. And then those are about every 2 months for professional development. And then I would be available to each of these schools for regular consultation as needed. And if there is a need to do some sort of professional development in addition to what we already have going on nationally, that's something that we're committed to in order to ensure that we're providing the resources to these schools to be successful. Our goal would be to have, if 10 schools take this on this year, to have all 10 achieve their designation at the end of the school year. So we are willing to, I'm happy to put on webinars like the one that we're doing right now for this group of coordinators in order to ensure their success.
Dr. Houlihan, I could see, was getting ready to comment.
We can do webinars now, even with existing technology. The audio, visual, and streaming service that we're putting into this room is specifically for streaming of our meetings. And so, but we can do webinars now with our current technology.
Okay, well, what I was just thinking is, if we live in the 21st century, we need to use all the stuff because this is sort of the first time that I've been in part of a meeting that is doing it this way, and it's really quite efficient.
So we'll work with Seth on a proposal and a plan and next steps, and we'll work on either a webinar type of training, or if he's going to come here and identify the 10 schools, and we'll be happy to report back to you all kind of where we are on an as needed basis.
Will you bring well, we would like to know, I would like to know the 10 schools before they're finalized.
Sure, we can do that.
Because there's arguments for all different, I'm thinking, boy, I wish we had it already, but we've got to start somewhere.
Not a problem.
Are you looking for the committee to endorse this, or is this for information and staff intends to pursue this?
As far as I'm concerned, right now it's for information. We wanted your feedback in terms of whether or not you thought this was something as a school system that you would be interested in us pursuing. If there's other comments or anything else on it, then I don't think we need any action from the board, but this is something we're interested in as a kind of school-wide school system initiative. We still need to talk with our principals about it and those kinds of things, but it's just kind of first glance to get a reaction from you all.
Mr. Sides, we can, I would be glad for you to present it to the full board when we have our next meeting and do the curriculum committee comments.
Well, I would like to, I'll just offer a motion that I would like the committee to endorse this program. I have done some previous investigation of the program, and I think it is an excellent opportunity for us to show the public our commitment to creating an environment in our schools which does not allow hate or bullying, and that is unsatisfactory behavior and not the kind of learning environment we want in our schools. And we are committed to doing something about it rather than just talking about it. So I'm going to offer the following motion that the curriculum committee endorse the implementation of the No Place for Hate program in Union County Public Schools. And if so approved, we'll take it to the full board.
Okay, got a motion. Need a second. Second. Have a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Do we have other options?
Uh,
Other organizations that can potentially help this, or are we stuck on No Place for Help? Stuck as a
I'm not aware of other organizations that do something like this that's at the student level. I know there are several organizations that our schools are working with now that we're also pursuing more on the parent education end. And, what do you do about social media? There are individuals that are local that are working in some of our schools doing that, and we're trying to work with them on countywide more of a presence as well. That's more on the parent education end. So combination of both. This is the only national or reputable group that I'm aware of, or staff that's researched, that can take this kind of common approach.
all right, it's 4-0. I was just thinking while that discussion was going on, when it's instituted at each school, I imagine each school would be able to put its own flavor into it, because I was thinking about the talent shows. That would be a great opportunity for each ethnicity that we have in the school to sort of deal with some of the misconceptions and make some money for their PTO or for their organization. Okay, we'll take that to the full board with a recommendation.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time today and your openness I'll look forward to hearing about our next steps.
Okay. Dr. Houlihan and designees, whoever he wants, will be back in touch, Dr. Faust and Dr. Jones. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Okay, moving along. Defensive driving.
The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will not.
Is that going to be Mr. McCraw? Or is Mrs. Traylor?
We actually have one item prior to that that didn't make it. It was the federal programs
Okay, I'm
presentation.
sorry.
And that's on there. So we can do that one quickly and then we'll pick up.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
No, it's not your fault. You were reading that next one. Okay. We had it on the agenda that went out for the public. Okay. All right, so you have slides in front of you entitled Federal Programs in Union County Public Schools. We're required, and by the way, good afternoon to the board members, and thank you very much for your support. We are required by the federal government to make sure that we present to our stakeholders, including our boards of education, information regarding how we apply Title I, Title II, and Title III federal funding. And I've asked Ms. Lisa Gibson to join us today as we go through this slide presentation regarding information. I'm going to give you details regarding Title I, Title II, Title III, and then if you have any questions, we certainly will answer. So your first, did it show up as a?
Where is it located?
It's a PowerPoint located on the bottom of the.
Just the no place for hate presentation.
Okay, all right. The board members have copies and.
Do you have it on a stick? You want me to? I could hook it up so that we could. Sorry.
I did have it prepared. I'm not sure what. It's on there. Okay. But board members, you'll go to your second slide. It starts with 5,223 students. Title I funding for the school system provides assistance to local school systems for schools that have high numbers or high percentages of children from low-income families to ensure that all children meet challenging academic standards. In Union County Public Schools, we have 9 elementary schools that receive Title I funding. 9 schools, 3 are in the Monroe cluster, 2 are in Sun Valley, and 4 are in Forest Hills cluster. Okay, if you go to the next slide, our allocation of Title I for this year is currently $5 million. You'll see on the top, $5,081,849. We have seen a decrease since last year. Student enrollment is a part of that formula. However, we did learn as we went into the year that there was money taken out for disaster relief. First time we've seen that, but money from the federal government that's taken away for the relief from the hurricanes that have occurred. Ms. Gibson has worked to process that. It's approximately $35,000 that was decreased. But that is our allocation for Title I.
So I'm going to share with you about the required set-asides. How's that? We do take a 12% set-aside for district administration. That includes expenses like personnel, materials, our portion of the light bill, whatever. Our contribution is there. Parental engagement, that is a requirement of 1% of the total allocations to be sent to each school. Pre-K, we have one pre-K classroom in each of the 9 Title I schools. We fund the teachers and the teacher assistants and additional supplies and materials. And we are also required to set aside for McKinney-Vento, which is the Homeless Act, as well as the Foster Care Stability, which is new legislation this past year, supporting children in foster care. This primarily is dedicated to transportation.
Could I ask you a question before we go to the next page? Sure. Do we have available slots in the pre-K program, or is there a waiting list at any of the schools in the pre-K?
We do have a waiting list. Our classrooms are 17 to 18 total students.
Okay. Do you know approximately how many overall?
Have a waiting list?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many total.
Can we apply other funds for the pre-K, the Smart Start funding, or any of that funding to meet those needs for pre-K?
We can do a dual or a blended approach.
Okay. Are we looking at trying to meet all the available need? I think particularly in these schools, a pre-K environment is critical to keeping them get up to pace with others that may have a daycare opportunity where they start to learn the social skills and start with everything. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can address that waiting list through a combination of monies, particularly for these schools, to try and accommodate all the additional need. Is that something we could look? Is that realistic, or are the pots of money too
There
disjointed?
are, and in the blended classroom that we've had in the past, it amounted to 3 slots, and our waiting list is so large. You know, ideally, if we could increase pre-K across the board, if we could increase the classes, we don't increase the class size.
You have 3 different funding sources, I believe, if that's correct, for pre-K.
Okay.
Title I pre-K,
Right.
EC pre-K, and NC pre-K.
NC pre-K.
And so in order to add more classes, number one, we have to have the classroom space in these Title I buildings. Number 2, we would have to get above and beyond the current funding that we're getting in any of those 3 categories in order to add additional teachers. Or as a local school system, if we wanted to examine that as a team, if that was something as a school system we wanted to apply local dollars to, that would be an option as well. But we've not begun that conversation yet. We've been relying more on state and federal funds for our pre-K program. I agree philosophically 100%. If we had pre-K in every single school and had pre-K for every single school that was rising to 5th grade, kindergarten, I would advocate for that to the state level. I mean, but we're dealing with the current funding that we have and are continuing to advocate for more.
I would just be curious if someone could give me the numbers, how many in the Title I schools, how many current slots we have and how large of a waiting list we have. And because of the other programs we've implemented at Title I, maybe this is the next piece in the puzzle to address the pre-K. We're making an all-out effort once they're in elementary school. Now let's take it down to pre-K, and perhaps if I will ask staff if you feel that it is worthy of a commitment of local funding to fill some of these slots.
So we'll be glad to come back to that conversation for sure. I will tell you that just on Monday we had a conversation as a team. I'm very much interested in forming what I'm calling a B8 task force, a birth to 8 task force that is a combination of employees and outside agencies that are both state and local level to really help us explore the state of childhood education, early childhood education from birth to age 8. We as a system kind of quasi-operate the birth to age 4 space here, which has been kind of a learning curve for me. And so with that said, I'm very much interested in exploring and studying and evaluating the degree of services that we're able to offer in partnership with other agencies from birth all the way up until they get to age 8. Because once we get them in kindergarten, they're ours. But I feel like as a school system, we could be doing a lot more before they even get to us to be much more proactive. So we'll be glad to go back and study, the need, the wait list can be provided in terms of the numbers. My general sense is that right now the demand outweighs the supply. We have more families that could attend our pre-K programs than we either have classroom space or funding to serve.
Now, and I'll even go a step further. If it is not feasible for a full implementation to meet all the needs, let's target a few schools, especially where we have the physical room to put them, and say, okay, we're going to start off with a commitment here, and we're going to meet the demand at these schools, and then we'll figure out, just as we're talking about implementation of the anti-bullying program, we'll figure out how we get all the way there. Let's get started. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And just just as a baseline, we have 162 Title I spots. We had probably between 260, 270 applications.
Let me throw else out there. I was just sitting here thinking about the old Career Center. We used to have a child care center there that taught the class. I don't know, we'll need to look into this, but it might be possible at the high schools to have then it switched to elementary education. We could be working with juniors and seniors, teaching them, but also actually dealing with some children. I don't know. I do know that social services does make childcare available for low-income people who are trying to re-enter the workforce. So sometimes it could be a cost-effective way of, getting them in. You remember the old childcare days and so I don't know. I'm just thinking, Gary, that would be a way of getting it at the high schools, where we could actually make it part of CTE too. Okay. Well, I'm sure staff will look at all these things.
Well, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Thank
Thank
you for your
you.
input. Looking at school allocations, the funds are allocated to be eligible. The school must meet the 50% poverty threshold using free and reduced lunch numbers. And we can use poverty bands from a high, medium to low to distribute.
As our Title I plan addresses elementary schools, we are required to provide comparable services to any other schools that exceed the poverty band of 50, with 75% of the students who receive free or reduced lunch. So we do provide comparable services to East Union Middle, Monroe High School, Monroe Middle School, and Forest Hills High School, and to support them with the comparable services. Here you have your information regarding the pre-kindergarten classes. And as Dr. Houlihan stated, Title I funding for each of those is one of the areas that we target with our pre-K services, non-teacher assistants for this current year at each of the Title I schools. Any questions regarding Title I funding? The next pot of funding is Title II funding. Most districts, including Union County, use their Title II funding for professional development. In particular, the funds are used to provide continuing, ongoing training that helps teachers understand our academic subjects as well as our learning strategies. So you'll see in the budget that improving teacher quality is what we write into the plan, with recruitment and retention of our teachers, professional development, as well as funding can be used for reducing class size. You do see that the allocation for the current year has decreased from last year. There is a concern that this may disappear next year under the current leadership of the federal government. So it is our hopes that that does not. That will be a huge gap for us, but that's where we stand today, and that allocation is there. So those are the three areas we work with. Any questions about Title II?
Can I go back to one question about Title?
Yes, sir.
Western Union used to be Title I, and due to the redistricting, it lost. If we had 10 schools instead of 9, would that increase our federal funding, or is the total money all they will give based on the?
You check me if I'm correct on this, but think of it as a pie.
Okay.
So we divide the funds that are available 10 ways instead of 9.
9.
Once you take off the overhead and other money we have to use for that, so you simply take them out of the equation.
So Western Union losing its Title I status, it affected the services there, but it didn't affect the federal resources that we have coming to the county.
That is correct.
Okay.
And when they lost, there was a period that we did support with the funds during transition on that.
Okay.
And then Title III funding, which is a part of the No Child, or was a part, the beginning of the No Child Left Behind Act is where it began. It authorizes funding for English language acquisition. In Title III funds in the
So
system.
we served 2,354 English language learners last year. We have 39 languages spoken by our students. We have our ESL resource intake center provides for our testing and registration of families when they come in. We are required to test for language proficiency so we can determine if a student is eligible for services. We also keep a library, a lending library at our resource center for our parents, families, and community members. And we also have resources out in the schools for checkout for families at the school and the staff.
All right, I have a question on Title III, 35, 5 bilingual facilitators, 6. So we're looking at 46 staff members. So we have to supplement this, don't we?
We do. And we do.
Where Title,
I am-
some of the Title 1 and 2 funds itself fully.
Well, that's intended to supplement what's in place.
Well, the reason I'm asking, like you said, Title 1, they give you 12% for administration. Title 3 don't give you, it only pays a percentage, right?
Right.
When you said supplement, you're talking about supplement financially, not supplement.
Financially, yeah,
The
we have,
program supplements the services in the classroom, but when we talk about supplement, there is a local piece on that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
no, well, what I meant was maybe the 35 teaching staff is not an option, but I'm just saying this program, and I know it happens a lot, it may be required, but they're not paying for all these they're not funding 100% of these positions.
I see your question. So teaching staff, the majority of our teaching staff does come from a state ESL fund.
So the state and the federal
Yes.
would come,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And of course, you see our Title III allotment for the current year, $284,701.
Okay.
And that's an overview of our title programs. Are there any questions?
I have one question. Could you repeat those numbers for the Title I pre-K slots? You had 160. How many was it?
We had 162 openings.
Mhm.
And I can double check, but this past year applications, it exceeded 250. It was in the 260 to 270 range.
Okay.
And we will send you an email with the confirmed numbers.
Oh,
on
okay.
this.
And could you educate me on the difference between our pre-K program and a Head Start program? We do not administer Head Start as a school system here, correct?
Correct.
How do the two go together, or they're serving a different population, just the general population, whereas we are responsible for the children in the Title I schools? Could you explain that?
We have criteria for meeting Title I needs. The NC Pre-K, those are state funds. Their criteria, I believe, I hate to speak for this, theirs is based primarily on socioeconomic status. In Title I, we're looking at that as well as our most neediest students as far as needing academic developmental support.
So could there be some children that have applied to our pre-K program but might be in Head Start as a
We do
result of not
refer.
being in ours?
Yes, we refer all of our families. If we don't have space, we refer them through the
Okay.
NC Pre-K program.
Okay, so we refer them, but we're looking for a little more of the adding a little more of the educational component than maybe a Head Start classroom is. Is that what I'm hearing?
The Head Start has a curricula from the state that they follow.
Right.
Our curricula is different.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure there are joint goals and objectives in those, but they are separate in design.
So of these applicants that we did not have slots for, let's say X number of them may be enrolled in a Head Start program somewhere.
Yes, based on referring. We didn't have room.
Okay.
We immediately referred them to NC Pre-K.
Okay.
For what was available there.
So then I guess the question becomes, we find out how many of those were not met either through, served at all, whether it be Head Start or our pre-K program. Hopefully that will be a lower number.
Dr. Jones, sitting here listening to Mr. Sides' question, on those numbers, Mr. Sides, you may want them to tell you where the request for room is. In other words, what school the waiting list is at.
Okay.
We can do that.
Yeah, for instance, just go to Benton Heights, 25 slots, 50 applied. And we think those that did X number, 10 of those who didn't get in were not able to get a Head Start slot. Does that make sense? Is that a good way to look at it?
We'll go back. Yes, sir.
Okay. So those are X, in the end, it's X number of pre-K children that were not met by either program. So they're sitting at home or at grandma's house or what have you. Okay.
The reason I would want that, we have some elementary schools with empty classrooms. And that's why it would be interesting to know, like Wesley Chapel, I believe, has empty ones, and Rayview, Shiloh. So, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Rape, our of course, request is that we may send this to the full board, and that they may look at it and have that information available for the next meeting.
Would you like a motion to endorse this information, or is it just for informational? Okay.
I'll entertain a motion to send it to the full board.
I will offer a motion that the curriculum committee refers the federal program and Union County Public School information as presented to the full board next week.
Just need a second. Have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. 4-0. Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Jones.
All right. The next item we have is defensive driving. This came at the request from the committee. We wanted to provide and will provide an update on driver's education, but there are also some questions regarding defensive driving. I've asked Ms. Blair Trawick, who is our district administrator for humanities, as well as oversees our driver education program, to come and share information. Also, Mr. Jarrett McCraw, our director of security and safe schools, he's here as well and can answer questions. So I'll let Ms. Trawick at this time. Pull that microphone closer to you. There you go. All right.
The sheet that you were provided, if you need another one, I have an additional copy if you need it. But it has updates of the budget for, do you need one, Mr. Sides?
Please.
Excuse me. Mr. Rapier. Good. Okay. It provides the information regarding your budget for 2017-18, and this is about $6,000 more, and it's all spent on salaries to fund driver's ed. The coursework of the left column is the coursework in the behind the wheel from July 2016 through June 2017. So you'll see how many kids broken down into charter, home, private, and public versus behind the wheel of charter, home, private, and public students that were served as well. And then the right column, in essence, is where we are up to date through the 21st of September.
So am I reading this right? Is driver education way off? Number-wise?
Help me.
How are we having more or like July 1st through September the 21st, we have 4 doing from home the coursework and then 28 driving. Is that just from last?
It's the carryover. There were 173 students that still need behind the wheel.
Okay.
Carryover from the summer. They may have finished, so
Okay.
they're in cycle
Okay.
to be educated.
That's what I was talking about. if our numbers hold up from last year, there's going to be a mad rush from here to the end of the year, isn't there? I mean, we had roughly 2,800 students take it last year, and right now we've only got 900.
So this is typical. We see this in the beginning of the year. We really
Okay.
see in the fall, and particularly when we get into the spring, because you have students that are in athletics that may be with football or fall sports.
Okay.
And so they have to work that in as well. So you see these periods of time that you have an influx of students that will be taking driver's ed.
The September class alone will be completed by the end of this week, had 464 in it.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
it definitely goes in surges. The next comment was those still needing behind the wheel as of September 21st is 173, but most of them being in Caddo, Cuthbertson, Marvin Ridge, and Weddington areas. Mid-August, we hired 6 new drivers ed instructors for our currently employees of Union County Public School and 2 are outside employees.
And we did that because we had some drivers retire or decide not to participate.
The next are the lists of all the vehicles that are over 100,000 miles, and there are quite a few of them. And we would like to look in the future of replacing 5 of those this school year.
Historically, we've replaced 5 or 6 per year within the budget because we want to make sure that fits in with the budget of driver's ed that we have.
I'm forgetting when Dr. Jones was the previous administrator.
Yes.
Didn't we approve some cars then?
So
too?
last year we purchased 4 or 5, somewhere in that neighborhood, but you approved that
But
last
it was
year.
just recently. I guess that's why I'm thinking it was.
And Ms. Trowick is letting us know for the year ahead, it may be in the spring. And she waited until the spring, making sure we had everything with allocation of funds. So
And
at
for
some
the-
point this year, we're going to want to look at adding another 4, 5.
And for the benefit of the public, as I remember it, they pretty much, it self-funds with the state
Yes.
resources.
Yes, sir, it is. It's all within the driver's ed budget.
Okay.
Nothing additional.
All right.
Below that, you'll see Union County Public School Driver Education online course. There are 8 modules, and it is broken down into what happens in each module that is shared with the students. Module 4 relates to the defensive driving. It is very heavy in driver safety. Not only does it have the DMV handbook applicable to it, but it also has tons and tons of videos, which is offered through our Canvas course. And we can share that information with you if you'd like. I can give you some samples of what they are, for anywhere from theft prevention to how to drive in the snow videos to how to avoid road rage. So, so those are the online course, and then the behind the wheel instruction, the lessons are broken down for you there as well, lessons 1 through 12 of what they actually do in the vehicles. Any questions about those? We looked into some defensive driving courses or programs or that sort of thing. There's National Safety Council, which offers a train the trainer type of model. And it's expensive, but it's an opportunity. It is not a hands-on. It's e-learning. However, it's not similar to like brakes, which would be more hands-on and controlled environment. There are a ton of resources available for parents of how they can be more involved and watch and model for their children while behind the wheel. But brakes was brought up and did some research, and I've spoken to a representative named Scott McCree from there.
Mr. Size, this is the program you asked us to look into. Yes.
It is free if you sign up and go to them, which is great. There's a $99 refundable that most people leave as a donation, but for them, and it's in Concord, and it's once a month. There's an average of 200 to 500 waiting list for each session. To bring it to Union County is $500 per student, and they need 300 to 500,000 square feet of open asphalt. If we thought about taking it, since Concord is very nearby, taking it to the drag racetrack there. He thinks that we could get it down to $335 per student, but that's still per student. There's 36 kids that are served with parents in a session, so that's 72 kids. And if you look at how many behind the wheel we did, that's 2,600. In addition, you have to have your learner's permit. So we're done with them. They've completed the driver's ed portion, and they want 30 hours of experience of driving as well, above and beyond their just receiving their learner's permit. Any other questions that I can answer about that?
Here was my reasoning behind talking with staff on this. I did some investigation, and I think we were all very concerned at the students that we lost recently due to road accidents. And as the son of an old driver education teacher, I remember my father purposely taking me out. Of course, this is up north. It's a little easier to get nasty roads and nasty weather. But I am concerned that we're going through, of course, a good program, but they don't have actual behind the wheel experience in emergency situations. And we all know the roads in North Carolina, there isn't much of a shoulder. It's very easy to go off and overcorrect coming back on. And that is my understanding caused one of the accidents. And hydroplaning is an occurrence as well that happens when you get a sudden downpour on a dry road. My line of thought, or my question, or my challenge, if you will, is to staff, is for us to pull together whatever resources we can. And I spoke briefly with the sheriff's department, with Jared. I know his experience on the highway patrol. There might be additional resources through the governor's highway safety program. Just like we built the online program for driver education when we were up against it, staff rose to the challenge, and we built a program that is state of the art and utilized throughout the state, if I'm not mistaken. I would like us to put together, and Jared, this may be something, if you pull the safety committee in on as well. Dennis, I know you serve on that. I would like to see us pick up the challenge of how we get as many kids as possible behind our own. If it has to be homegrown, then so do it. But they get real world behind the wheel experience in dangerous road conditions. And I don't know the timeline of doing something like this. I'll leave that to you folks. And as far as budget goes, I think you will have a sympathetic ear in the finance committee. I'll just go out on a limb on that. But I want to see, and I know, Ms. Trawick, you're having conversations, as you mentioned, with the folks at Breaks. I think it's a matter of, we got to figure out a way to give more of these kids this kind of experience before we turn them loose on the roads and lose any more. So I would just, like to lay that with you folks and see what you feel like the possibilities are.
Sure, I believe we can do that. And what we'll do is assess, first of all, what we're teaching. That would probably involve bringing our driver's education instructors together and have a conversation and look at our standards and see what could we do to enhance and build upon. We would still deliver the program as prescribed and required by the state, but we're talking about adding to that. So we could begin with our.
Well, you're talking about adding or modifying. I mean, in our current behind the wheel instruction, there are modules and lessons on open road racing. I think what I hear Mr. Side saying, I'm agreeing with you, Dr. Jones, is examine and evaluate that particular module as an example. And if there are other resources we can bring in or avenues to enhance or expand that particular lesson as an example, that might be an avenue to take.
And there is, I recently read, it's called Zen Drive, and it rates how students and people around schools are driving, including phone usage, quick braking, and things like that.
There is a committee in Charlotte Safety and Health Council of North Carolina, and they had safe teen driving as well. And they actually went away from the hands-on as well because it kept ruining the vehicles, and so they went to an all verbal demonstration.
And we also use the VIP program, and it's done every other year at our schools. Is that right, Jared? I'm sorry, Mr. McGraw, is that right? The VIP program?
Yes.
At schools, it's every other year per school?
It is. Come on up, get the microphone. Thank you. The VIP program is vehicle injury prevention for a very important person. We had it scheduled for Cata and Monroe High School this year. We did not complete that because of Officer Peretti's death. We didn't feel it was a good year for that. Next year, we will complete 2 schools. So it is a safe driving program. It talks about not drinking, not using drugs. It talks about not texting. It's usually geared toward juniors and seniors in high school. And it's been very effective with our students and our staff members. So it's a good program.
It is. I've actually seen it, and it really puts it in perspective of what can happen if you do X, Y, and Z. And you hear from parents who've lost a child, and they actually see a wreck scene. It's an acted out wreck scene, but it's still pretty vivid.
Ms. Trey, would you repeat? I think you were talking about what I was wondering about. You said that, did you say it went from an actual driving experience to a verbal?
They did. This one particular place called Safe Teen Driving in Charlotte.
Because I was thinking we could create a situation where they would hydroplane, but once they come out of that water, I could see the car flipping.
Liability would be high.
That's what I'm thinking. To teach it, the liability goes through the roof. So
It does.
I
mean,
know.
overcorrecting, and we require 12 hours, 6 hours behind the wheel and 6 hours of observation. So we never have one child in the car. So I can't imagine as a parent myself I would love my children to have that experience, however, in that training, but the idea of having another child in the vehicle at the same time.
That would be a perfect example for a virtual reality situation, sitting in a booth. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Okay, that's good. Good. Okay, next item. You requested an item update on Spire. I'll ask for Ms. Webb to come forward, as well as Ms. Rule, to give you an update. Yes, sir. No problem. We had a great start last year based upon your funding and your direction with the Spire curriculum and the implementation, and we have moved forward with year number 2 on how we can advance. So I'll welcome our guests to share more.
Good afternoon.
It's on. It's on. There you go.
All right. We wanted to talk with you today about the use of the Spire program and, just update you on where we are with that. We had, and we let you know last year, we had trained 30 of our elementary resource level teachers, which was approximately 75% of our teachers. We did obtain the materials to provide training for 25%, the other 25%, plus possibly some of our more specialized setting teachers as well. We will be looking to do that. We're waiting on the company to get back with Carrie to provide the dates for that. We're currently taking the data on the program. As Carrie has explained to me time and time again, it takes a year to a year and a half to fully understand what type of progress we can see with children. But she does have some anecdotal things to share with you. So do you want to kind of do that a little bit?
Sure. I do want to just digress just a little bit. We are collecting data right now based on baseline data. When the kids entered the school year this year, where are they in their reading level? Where are they in their levels of phonological awareness, phonics knowledge, and decoding multi-syllable words, all of which are addressed through the use of the Spire program. So we're getting that baseline data so that we can see where they are at the middle of the year and then again at the end of the year, and then continuing to follow those kids in subsequent years as they move through the Spire curriculum and instruction with their teacher. one of the things that we have noticed, and this is anecdotal and talking with teachers and what they're noticing with the kids since they have implemented the program, is that it is taking about 1.5 years before they see an impact on the child's total reading. And that is likely because the deficit was so profound that it's taking 1.5 years to instruct those kids in all the missing gaps, meaning all of the sounds in the English language, which letter combinations are associated with those sounds, what visual cues do you look at to know what sound is supposed to be said in a word. It's taking about 1.5 years before we see a spike in reading level. But when we see the spike in reading level, it's significant. 1.5 years, 2 years or more growth that we're seeing from one period, middle of the year to the end of the year, for example, from one to the next, simply because the student now has enough information to tackle harder text, where before they were overusing some of their other strategies and relying on some of those other compensation strategies where they just hit a brick wall and they couldn't proceed any further. So it's been really neat to see those kids make leaps and bounds of growth. But of course, our implementation, we just started with the majority of our EC teachers being trained last year, finishing up around January, or actually, no, that was our first training, was in January, and then we had 2 trainings thereafter. So I'm really excited to find out what the data is going to show us within the program, phonological awareness, phonics knowledge, and then waiting to see what data do we have to say that we really are seeing, how long is it taking before we see that impact on total reading. So.
And based on the materials usage from last year, we are looking at approximately 418, 420 students that participated in the SPIRE program just last year, with probably more coming this year.
Yes.
So we're really, happy about that. One of the things that we wanted to also share is, in the past, you've asked about something for the older students. And so we've been doing some research on what we can do to help at the middle school level. And Carrie's been digging into that very deeply.
Yes, and I think that, Mr. Sides, I believe you're the one who posed the question about middle school and asked, can we not take the SPIRE curriculum and pull it up to middle school to help those students who are struggling in automatic word recognition at that level? And my response at that time was that the research of SPIRE shows that it's most beneficial in the elementary realm, and that still holds true. We're not seeing the impact, and nationwide, we're not seeing the impact of SPIRE on adolescent readers like we are in the primary grades and in the earlier grades. So I think that SPIRE is a program that has effectiveness for our early readers, but once they become adolescent readers, the problems shift a little bit. Number one, the kids are struggling with automatic word recognition. The national data shows that kids who truly struggle in reading, about 85 to 90% of those kids have a deficit in automatic word recognition, which goes all the way back to phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, all of those things are within that. And just because those kids go to middle school doesn't guarantee that the gap has been filled. But what they're saying is that the adolescent reader doesn't buy in to some of the practices that you would utilize with primary students. And therefore, that's likely why SPIRE is not as effective for those adolescent readers. And so I've been investigating, number one, what are the biggest gaps that exist? And one of the things that we found was that for middle school students who struggle in reading, that their gap is mostly with multisyllabic words. That means words that have more than one syllable. They're having a hard time decoding those, reading those, spelling those, figuring those words. Yeah, the bigger the word, the harder it is. And so I have found research-based programs that address those issues with students. And one of the ones that I'm kind of fond of at this point is mega words. That's the one that I tend to be leaning toward at this point, because it extends off of what they learn in Spire, and it's really age appropriate. The content is engaging for older students. I know this is odd because not many people do this, but just for fun, I pulled in some kids this summer and I actually used mega words with those students to see my impression of it, because now that I'm out of the classroom, I can't just take a program and say, hey guys, this is good. I mean, I have to actually go through it and experience it. And so I did that this summer with some students, and it had very positive impact on those students' reading abilities. And it happened very quickly for them. Well, I was also supplementing with all the other things I know about reading, but that was one of the components of what I was doing with those students, and their ability to decode longer words increased dramatically just over the course of the summer. So I was very impressed by that. It goes into the teaching of syllable types. One of the things that hangs up our adolescent readers is they don't know what the vowel says. They don't know if it's a long sound or a short sound. Well, it's fine if it's a single syllable word, because I can just flip the sound. If the long sound didn't work, I try the short sound. Oh, that's a real word. Now do the word encyclopedia. Not so easy with all those vowel sounds and trying to figure out what those vowel sounds say. And so part of mega words that they incorporate is telling them what that vowel sound says based on the syllable types. So it builds in also a lot around morphemes. That means the smallest unit of a word that has meaning. So you're looking at prefixes, suffixes, Greek and Latin roots that help to build meaning and decoding. So
that's just something to lay on your plates to think about.
Well, hold on. I won't. All right. So what's the next step with MegaWord? Well, let me ask you first. Do you feel MegaWords is also appropriate on the high school level for any that we've identified?
I have not explored it with high school students. It specifically, I think, says grades 4 through 8th.
All right.
Is what it's designed for. There are 8 levels in which it progresses through. And I know that it's great for that 4 through 8.
All right.
They buy into it, which is half the battle.
Okay.
Yes.
So we would conduct an alignment review and make sure that it fits in with where our framework is, our focus upon literacy this year, and then we would share that with you.
You read my mind. I wanted to ask you, what's the next step in the evaluation where you feel like you want to take this from, hey, this looks good, to, yeah, let's do it? Yeah. And what kind of a timeline is that from time-wise? When should we expect to see you back on this?
We'll be working on that this year. And this is a project we're continuing to work on, and we'll bring the progress to you on that.
This calendar year?
Yes, sir. Well, during the school year.
This calendar year.
We're going to take our time with purpose on this and making sure that it aligns. We do that with any of our curriculum approaches, and we'll share and make sure that it's all aligned with what we're doing with word study across the board.
So you do kind of a blind taste test. You bring some middle schoolers in, and you put them through the curriculum, and you start to more formally study the results. Is that kind of where you go through with it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is Spire fully implemented now? Are all trained and equipped?
No, not everyone is. We're training 30 more teachers this year. About at the conclusion of last year, 75% of our elementary resource teachers were trained. Of course, some of those teachers left. We have some new teachers that were brought on. So we have 30 more spots open for this year for training. That should get all of our resource teachers at the elementary level, as well as a few of our specialized settings, like Dr. Webb was saying.
Okay. And when do you expect that training to be completed, did you say?
The company, I'm waiting to hear back from them about the dates that they have available to come here and provide the training.
Okay. Okay. So we're not sure when that last that will be
Right.
completed yet and
Right.
ready to
It
go.
will happen this year, though. I'm pretty sure that
This
we'll end
calendar
up
year or
having-
this school year?
It will happen this school year. It's 3 days of training. It's one full day and 2 half days.
Okay.
And we space those out. I do anticipate that the first training will be within this first calendar year. And typically after the first training, the teachers have enough information in which they can go back to the schools and start implementing with students.
Okay.
And then the other 2 sessions are refining and making sure that they're fully understanding and coming back with questions that they may have.
So when they are ready, we will already have the supplies in hand.
We actually just received the supplies on the 22nd. They just were
Okay.
delivered to our warehouse for the training. The only thing we're waiting on is the date of training from the trainers.
Okay.
So
At full implementation of Spire, which sounds like I'm hoping it's going to be before the end of the school year. How many students do you think we will have? Are you able to tell so far? Will we have totally enrolled
That
in a program?
depends. I think that depends on the need of the student.
Okay.
That will depend on the need of the student.
So we haven't identified all the candidates for Spire yet. We've identified them where they are trained to start utilizing it. But as far as system-wide at the elementary level, we haven't identified all the candidates to use it yet. Is
No,
that
I think
the way
that-
it works?
No, I think we rely on teachers and we rely on them to use the assessment tools
Right.
in order to identify which students might, prove to be the most successful with the use of Spire. Spire
Right.
is not meant to be an across-the-board curriculum.
Okay. So you haven't really assessed in all the schools where you don't have all the training completed and ready to implement.
Each
Is that
school
the way it
has-
works?
Each school has.
each school has at least one teacher who has
Okay.
been trained in the Spire curriculum. They have also had training in how to look at data to determine if the student's needs match that curriculum, if that's an option for that student. Because just because a kid is struggling in reading doesn't mean that Spire's
Right.
the answer for
Right.
them.
It's-
It
it
depends
could be
on their
something else.
areas of deficit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but yet we still haven't identified all the candidates that might utilize Spire yet.
I would say we probably haven't.
Okay. Okay.
I would say we probably haven't.
Okay, and
Just
that's works
because
in
all of
progress.
our resource teachers have not yet been trained. We have one resource teacher in each school, each
Mm-hmm.
elementary school, but she isn't charged with seeing all EC students. It's just her caseload.
Okay. Well, I will be very interested in hearing, if possible, the ongoing results of Mega Words or whatever you're finding, and of course the full implementation of Spire. And I will look forward to your information. I thank you for your hard work.
Oh, thank you.
I have a couple of questions, and you kind of answered it, but at one time I heard you say 75% of the people had been trained, but then you said we have one at each school.
Mhm.
What does that mean, that 75% of the total teachers we needed?
Of the EC resource teachers.
Okay.
Resource support teachers.
So there were last year, there were 55 elementary resource teachers. 41 of them have been trained. Last year, 30 of those teachers were trained, which means 11 of those teachers were trained prior to last year. Since that time, some of those teachers have left, and we've gotten new teachers in. So now we're training 30 additional. So that means that all EC resource teachers in elementary schools should be trained by the end of the year.
Okay, and you talked about a year and a half, and since we funded this in January, February, March,
Yeah.
will we be seeing data-driven results at the end of this school year?
Oh, absolutely. We've started collecting the baseline data already.
And is it going up?
Is
Did you do baseline?
baseline data is where the kid's starting.
But did you do it last year when you first started the program?
We did not, because we couldn't guarantee fidelity of the program.
When you're already midway through the school year.
Right, yeah.
So what I would propose as a next step, I would love for you all to come back maybe in the late spring, whenever we have the answers to 2 questions. What does the data look like, number 1? And number 2, what would be the results of your evaluation for middle grades if we want to do anything? But that, I would contend, we're not ready to do that until later on in the school year.
But the final result should be increased DPI reading test results.
That would depend on if you're serving children that are in third grade. But what we're looking at in kinder first, second would be not necessarily state end of course exams. It would be other kinds of assessments like maybe M-class or dibbles, your running records, those kinds of data sets.
That's right. So we may not see results to these Spire children get to the third grade.
You'll by defining results in terms of third grade proficiency on EOG, you should start to see that in any of our children that have been in this Inspire since spring of last year, if they were a second grader then and a third grader this year. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. What I would contend is there are other data sets that we should be able to use to communicate what results mean.
Thank you.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to give you a brief update on our family portal that's in place. We have, of course, had a successful launch this year, and we are continuing to work on making this better as a service for our parents. We know that getting the information out to parents further is important, so we do have our family portal nights that are set up, and they're branded as Family Technology Nights. On the 9th of October, we'll be at Porter Ridge High. The 12th in October, Monroe High School. The 16th, Cuthbertson High School. The 19th, Forest Hills High School. And we're pairing that presentation also with information on parents for FAFSA and application and supporting. So our teams will be coming together to work with that. In addition, we want to, on the portal, give information for parents how they can engage with the resources and making sure that the information has gotten there. I know Mr. Rape, you and several of our leaders have talked about how we can improve that. We right now will be working on the website producing some sort of video, some sort of 2-minute brief presentation that a parent can click to get information on resources, as well as what they need to do in using the portal and how it can be supportive. We also are making sure that we have, with the digital text that we have that are available in our inventory, that we make sure that there are no barriers students have in access. So we're actually surveying our teachers and making sure our teachers respond to us that they have the adequate number of digital text that are available, if that's available in their subject area, that they can use. And we're sending that information out to our teachers. One thing we're also, an idea that we had from a conversation is a problem-solving tab that we're going to put on the portal, that if a parent or a student has information, they actually can push that. It will push a field out that they can fill out the information, and that will go directly to our administrative assistant in the college readiness department. Her name is Ashlyn, and that way we can get information to the parent and get and problem solve. So a way that we can get that in, and they can do that digitally. We also want to look at pushing out 2 items of information for parents. First of all, it is our hope and desire that teachers are sending out what the resources that are available. But if that doesn't happen from a district-wide, what we can say for 10th grade, here are the resources that are available to you to be able to be used. So we want to make sure that we develop that, as well as documentation on the standards of what parents will see that their students will be working with by either by the semester or by the 6 weeks. And we have that information, but we want to format it in a way that we can continue to add to the portal with that information.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. And I want to tell the rest of the committee, it's been Dr. Jones has done a fantastic job along with Ms. Rimmer and Ms. Gardner. I'm sorry. All I could draw up was her husband's name. He's such a legend in sports. But there have been difficulties, but we have got past those difficulties, they assure me. I mean, they had trouble pulling it up in the early days of this, but they're going to monitor it now.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, my whole goal is if a parent comes up to you and says, I cannot find the digital resources, we're trying to get a mechanism in place where they can go to. Ms. Garner, I believe, said she was going to try to produce a 2-minute, the little presentation about how to do it.
Mhm.
I told them, you know, they've got to assume that everybody's not tech smart.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? But, and Dr. Jones, he mentioned something else that is key. Once, I think now they're going to reach out to the teachers and make sure they're using these resources as part of their total teaching tool.
That's correct. Making sure that there are no barriers, that they're not saying we don't have enough copies. If there's a problem with inventory, we can work on that.
And when he talks about barriers, even Dr. Jones, there was some filters from the vendors that was stopping us.
That's right.
So when you had people tell you, we don't have no digital textbooks, we had them, but there was obstacles in the way. And if Miss Garner is going to present, come on, Miss Garner.
Just you go right here, and then you'll just stay here. Any additional questions though with the portal or anything that we can add? Ms. Gardner's working with that.
Will that come off the phone app as well as the website, or how will you access?
You should be able to access it in both places.
Mr. Sides, from what I heard with our meeting last Friday, I think getting the parents to the informational meetings is going to be key, isn't it?
Right here.
From the app.
Yeah,
So it's off of the main UCPS website. I haven't navigated the app to know where in the app you'd find it.
Okay.
Casey may know. She's coming up. And the form now to submit your issues is live.
It is.
Yes, that piece has been completed and tested.
All right, let's see. So it's not one of the
They have,
shortcuts.
we had a
I
very
need to
good
go to
long
maybe.
meeting last week, and you need to talk with Miss Garner and Miss Rimmer when if you have questions. The ones of you that have students, children that are students, you're sitting in the driver's seat because you can really look at it more than I can. And I was quite impressed. And to be honest with you, another problem I realize that's beyond our control is internet service.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Dr. Jones and his assistants have put in a tremendous amount of work on this. And I feel good about it. We just want to follow it through and make sure the naysayers are stopped and they say hallelujah.
We will continue to work on it, and thank you for your support.
All right.
Hang on one second here. So your next item is CTE. So I'll ask Mr. Filter, and if you'll just remain here. Questions you.
Come on up, Mr. Filter. From the board members that I have talked to about this CTE, and I hadn't talked to all of them, I guess our biggest concern, we realize we've never seen a CTE budget. We learned about the music production facility at CATA kind of when it run into asbestos. And, you know, we just, I don't have to, we're not going to, on the budget, you know, it would be nice if we could start, not that there hadn't been, but just asking questions, some transparency. I know Mr. Sides had talked to me about why are we adding programs maybe that have low enrollment when we have waiting lists to get into other academies. Maybe curriculum would like a little more lead time to know where you're at, what, you know, where do we have backlogs, what classes are not fully enrolled. I know being on facilities, one question I have on the asbestos abatement, just being direct, will CTE be able to cover that 20-something thousand? You know, I know you paid for the actual classroom renovation, but it got into a can of worms that cost 20-something thousand.
So I can answer at this point in time, I have not been asked to, CTE has not been asked to fund that 20-some thousand.
But it also would mean it would take away from something else. And I guess that's why it'd be nice to see the budget of where we're at.
So, and I know that Mr. Covington is working on a presentation for you to include that information.
And Dr. Jones did call me yesterday and say it may not be.
And I spoke with Mr. Covington right before this meeting. He is making the adjustments, and he said he will be sending that out to you. So I would anticipate that will come shortly.
And all the other.
That to all,
Yeah,
yes.
to all the full board.
But I did speak with him before the meeting.
And I welcome the opportunity. Historically, I just have not been asked to present to the board, but I welcome the opportunity to come in and provide information regarding items that we're looking at.
Yeah, that would be helpful too, the budget as far as, and also your long-range plan for the other classes to implement and where. That would be a big help.
And another thing, the map that Miss Merrill was talking to you about, from my understanding, all the academies are not listed on there. There's some missing.
I will verify that and add anything that is not.
Okay.
I'm actually meeting with Ms. Stolbert on Friday to coordinate that and make sure everything's there and make that more available to
I will try to
the
get to
public.
you the information that I have of the ones that are not showing up on that map. Or I'll send it to Dr. Jones. And
You can send it to me either way.
Where are the pressing needs for CTE? Where's the demand at? What are you seeing? I know the auto tech at Forest Hills, Dr. Plew was really excited about that. I mean, you know, when we have a principal say, I really need this, that's what you want to hear as a board member.
You know, automotive across the county, there's definitely a student interest. And there's a demand for those workers. And the other side of that is, even if there's not a specific demand, it's a transferable skill, because if they're learning to use those tools on a small engine or automotive engine, they can use that from a manufacturing perspective. I've talked to a local manufacturing, you know, about an initiative, and we're trying to work through that where the students will take curriculum for 2 or 3 out of the 5 days, and that company bring a trainer in for the other 2 days, so that they have students coming out of high school ready for that specific job. That's strictly in the discussion stages and not enough, but those are the type of things that we want to be able to offer to the community.
And Mr. Filter was telling us that a while ago, me and Miss Merrill, and it was real exciting. And he said, but he's had trouble. You've got October is what month, as far as you had a show or something?
So upcoming right now, next week is Manufacturing Awareness Week. And so it's an opportunity for Union County manufacturers to open their doors to students, parents, counselors, administrators, to show what is happening in Union County and the jobs available here, right here locally.
But you were saying that company you had talked with, they have 50 openings at all times. But he's having trouble getting them to call him back about participating next week. So, you know, well, no, this way they start off with young people. They actually put them in the classroom 2 days a week with the teacher, Gary, and teach them.
Right.
So that when they come out of high school, they've got some basic skills. But and no matter how hard a work Dr. Jones or Mr. Filter does, if the companies won't follow up.
Well, it's just been my personal experience, when there are employers like that in the county that are desperate for help, they reach out to temp employment agencies and pull those people in. They don't really think of the investment in our graduating and our high school students as a ready-made job force. They want those that are already out there. I mean, that's been my experience.
And
anyway.
they actually indicated the same thing, that they're entry-level jobs, a lot, most of them come through the the temp agency. But, you know, if they could find students trained in what they need to be trained in, you know, they would certainly look at that opportunity. But again, it's a work in process, just in the discussion stage.
And of course, we go back to the board meeting last month. We will be surveying the students to find out the demand this year. We also said that we will be doing strategic planning and looking at supply and demand. So that's in the process this year.
Just for the benefit of the other board members, I know in auto mechanics, UTI goes around and actually gives out some scholarships to some of these young men and ladies where they'll teach them to go to the ASE certification program. Some of Mr. Presley's students have got full tuition. All they had to do was go to, I believe it's in Mooresville.
There's one in Mooresville. The students participate in the Career and Technical Student Organization, Skills USA. And so as part of that, based on how they perform there, they're offered scholarships to UTI and others.
The ones that place well.
Correct.
Right. And he's had some. He's been to nationals.
Correct.
Which is quite a statement for any CTE teacher, and we've had many.
And so they've also recently added a student certification for ASE along with AWS for the welding perspective.
Okay. So the budget's going to be coming to us, and then we can sort of look at it and start asking questions.
Absolutely.
All right. Will it have already committed, or is everything committed for the year, or you still have some discrepancy in?
Yeah, I mean, everything would not be committed because as you go through, especially for some of those programs, you don't know what piece of machinery or equipment or something might wear out or something of that nature.
Right.
And some of it's based on class sizes, and second semester, you know, that's going to fluctuate based on the number of students that are taking specific classes.
So you've got a tremendous juggling act, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We'll be glad to come back, and after you all get the budget, I know by close of business today that should be going to the full board. And as Dr. Jones said, we're evaluating everything related to CTE, and we'll be glad to come back and update you.
Good thing about we're finally talking. Yeah. Okay, moving along to school program, AP and IBM. Thank you.
Ms. Gardner has some information to provide for you regarding our AP enrollment data. You do have a handout that she will go through with you.
Okay, so just a couple of quick facts about our advanced placement programming. We have increased our participation by 7.7% this year. So I'm just going to kind of go through the slides that you have in front of you. All 10 of our high schools increased their numbers in AP students, and all 10 high schools now currently offer at least 10 AP courses in a face-to-face format.
But that is a major change. I just want you all to know. When I came in here a year ago, I quickly noticed that in some schools we were offering 5 AP courses, 7, far less than 10, and in some schools we're offering 20 plus. And from an equity perspective, I don't believe that's fair. And so I challenged our high school principals last year, and I told them for the coming school year, we at a minimum should be offering at least 10 face-to-face. Now, there are more blended learning AP courses online as well that you could offer, but I do want to say a big thank you to our high school principals for working together to solve that. That is a change, and they followed our lead, and very proud of the fact that we have all of our high schools following a minimum consistent standard.
And you can see that 7 of them added at least 1 additional AP course this year, really some of them to get to that threshold of 10.
Dr. Hooley and I had already looked through the numbers. I didn't see any at 5.
The data that was made available that I reviewed was from the 15-16 school year.
Oh, okay.
So it's a lagging indicator.
So you adjusted last year?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So as far as our performance, just a quick highlight for our performance, you can see that we had a total of 4,559 exams that we took, and we had almost 3,000 of those that scored a 3, 4, or a 5. And so to me, the increase in participation while also increasing the total number of exams with a 3, 4, or 5 is great, because not only have we provided more access to kids, but we're also seeing increased results as well. So that was a 3.5% increase in the number of exams that had a 3, 4, or 5, which is considered passing for AP.
I'm very impressed by this data just the compilation of it. Is this something that's been ongoing, or was this just created this school year?
It was created this school year, but we've had AP presentations that have been given to the board.
But what I'm saying,
over the
this
past years.
can become a living document where you can see where we've been and where we're going.
This data is new this year. The emphasis has been for the past 2 years, particularly when Dr. Houlihan came in last year. How can we advance? So
Right, but
the emphasis has been there.
and it made me feel good to see the schools that had added classes. You never like to see, but Forest Hills added to, all of our older schools added classes. So great.
So a couple of the different pieces as you'll look through, each of the schools are represented in there. You can see the total number of courses that they have and also the number of students that are enrolled there. Some of the highlights at the bottom that show you, for example, with CATA, they no longer offer AP chemistry this year, but a lot of times what you'll see at high schools is, depending on the personnel and the demand from students, they might offer AP biology one year, and then the alternate year, those students will move up a grade, so they might offer AP chemistry. So if they offered it last year, they're offering AP bio this year, and then next year, so they kind of go back and forth on some of those different courses.
I have a quick question. Do we have numbers to indicate how, like the very first page is the CATA page, how many courses there are and how many of the AP enrollment, how many actually passed with the 3, 4, or 5, so that we know how successful these classes are in each cluster?
We do, and I can provide that to you. I don't have it for you right now, but yeah, we can provide that. Those are reports that are made available through AP, and I believe that Mr. Bowers provided an executive summary of AP that had some of that information in it, so we can provide that as well.
And I like what you said about where you said AP biology had been dropped, but they might, chemistry was dropped, but they may have added biology. That's what we were talking about in CTE. Let's go to where the demand is,
right,
instead of trying to offer classes, just offer classes.
And one of the things that you'll see as you look through the report is that there are some courses that we've struggled to find instructors for. So one of the things that we're doing specifically with a course that's a fairly new course, computer science principles, I am looking into partnering with some community partners. Microsoft has a relationship with a company called Teals that specifically does that, helps you provide instructors for computer science principles. It's really hard to find people that are qualified to teach that, who are willing to basically take the pay that they would have to do to teach it compared with what they could make if they were doing computer programming out in the industry.
Dr. Houlihan, would it help us to enable you to go after the teachers that she's talking about if the demand is there, to possibly some kind of stipend? If we have a 25 to 30 group of children at one school that want it and show all the signs of you being able to pass it, do we need to look at possibly giving you some latitude to get those qualified instructors?
Maybe. It really depends on teacher certification and what kind of certification they have. Now, right now at the state level, they're exploring different lateral entry and different certification types. The state's committed to figuring out how we could have different teachers that can come in that are alternatively prepped and licensed, which would help tremendously. But at the local level, in terms of licensure or incentivizing or giving different opportunities, Ms. Gardner is going to talk at the very end about a next step that we have, and it's an idea that we talked about in terms of how do you identify your highest performing teachers of AP and put them in a position to train, coach, teach other teachers that are teaching the same courses. So we'll get to that. That's more of a teacher leadership role that I think would further incentivize more of our teachers that want to be AP teachers.
So if you'll just flip to the end, you can see the numbers for each of the schools, and I'd be happy to answer questions that you have about the information that's provided there. I really just wanted to give you a couple of highlights from each school as far as just some notables about their courses that they offer. But at the very end, we're looking at supporting AP teachers in a couple of different ways. One thing is we're going to try to identify, we're going to have schools identify who's going to be their main contact for advanced placement, whether that's an administrator, whether it's a guidance counselor, or an AP teacher that wants to take a teacher leadership role, so that we can have one point of contact with each of the schools. We're going to work on allowing our teachers, because a lot of times if you're the AP biology teacher, you're the only one in your building. So it's really hard to be part of a professional learning community to plan together. Like you would have if you have 4 or 5 teachers that teach Math 1 at a high school. So what we're trying to do is to get each of those, we call them singletons. You're the single person at your school teaching that course. We're going to try to get those teachers together. Not only you can see half-day planning once a semester where they'd come face-to-face, but then also following up with a course that's in Canvas that would be only for the teachers that are involved, where they could have some ongoing dialogue back and forth just virtually through the course. That is something that we would be able to support them with, and they could share needs. They can also put their curriculum in there, and we're going to work toward getting those teachers to create one district-wide syllabus, because each of the teachers has to send their syllabus to the College Board to officially certify their course with to be able to teach AP. And so one thing that they're going to do this year through those virtual meetings is to come up with across the district so that we can have a guaranteed AP biology syllabus that everybody can submit to the College Board for their AP course. So that'll be part of the work that those teachers do. And then looking at the potential of an AP summit where teachers would volunteer their time to come and learn from each other. This has been done before in other districts, and teachers will volunteer to come in and have that opportunity to learn and present and share. Possibly looking at doing that in partnership with another district or with the Southwest Education Alliance to see if they might be willing to help us put something together for multiple districts around the region where they could plan and host it. And then as far as increasing enrollment, innovation is part of my department. And so I'm always kind of thinking about new and different ways that we can increase enrollment without necessarily affecting the class size in other courses, right? Because one of the things that you have to be careful of is if you offer an AP course and 15 students sign up for that, most courses are between 25 and 30 students. So what happens to those other 10 to 15 students? You have to figure out somewhere, and they just get put into other teachers' classrooms, which could increase enrollment. So I have a couple of ideas for how we can increase AP enrollment without negatively impacting other classrooms. And so as Dr. Julian was talking about, this blended reach program is something that that I would like to look into. So we may be bringing some ideas to you for that, with looking at some incentives for teachers that could actually be funded within current budget. Wouldn't necessarily ask for an additional allotment, but some creative ways to fund that. But it really just, a lot of it is outside the box thinking of, how do we allot positions and how do we allow those positions to kind of be molded and moved around. We're also going to explore the idea of pairing some AP courses. So if you are a junior, you're most likely taking U.S. History and English 3. Well, we have an AP course for AP English and AP U.S. History, and so you could pair those and do those all year long, so that students could take those during one block, and they'd have them every other day, but they would work together. So looking at the possibility of pairing some courses so that students would sign up for both. If you pick one, you got to do both of them, and then it would be 2 different teachers, and so you'd have to figure out what their schedules looked like. A lot of times those are the courses that have, at a lot of our schools, enough enrollment to have 2 sections. So a teacher would have a section A and a B, or you'd have to look at what their planning would look like. They may have a half a planning there, and then if they taught a different course. So you have to, there's some creative scheduling that has to happen and figure out what that looks like. But I think we can do that. We're also going to work on having presentations for students during registration time about the benefits of AP. And whether you pass the course or not, there are data that show that students who just experience the rigor of an AP course end up being more successful in college. Even if they score 1 or a 2 on the test, that the benefits of having that advanced rigor are there. And then looking at as the high school counselors do some parent meetings, including a piece on AP and kind of talking about that. So those are some of the pieces that we're looking at to increase enrollment.
If they score 1 or 2 on the test, do they still get credit for the course?
They do. They do. Their AP score does not factor into their overall grade because of when the scores come back.
So a person might get a 1 or 2, and that's still not failing. It's just they didn't achieve what we want to.
Right. They're not going to get college credit for that. And it's really hard to tie college credits to an AP score because different universities have different requirements. Many of them accept a level 3. Some of them won't accept anything but a 4. Some of them won't, 4 or 5. And some, the most rigorous, will only accept a level 5 to get credits. But really, it just kind of depends. But usually a level 3, most of the UNC system schools will take a 3 for most courses. And some, it really just depends on what you get.
Fellow board members, this has been a huge education for me.
The school improvement plans, we just want to make you aware that we're in the season in which we are making sure that we document as required by the state what our school improvement efforts are. This is year number 2 in the biennium, of course, that with the school improvement plans, the schools simply tweak or make adjustments to their plans written from last year. A couple of additions to this year, we are adding, each school has a literacy goal that's based upon the literacy for you plan that we have. Those were written back in the summer and they're being implemented this year and monitored as well. So those plans are being put in as well. The schools right now, they are making those adjustments, and those will be done by October the 23rd. And between the 23rd and November the 6th, you will have the chance to be able to review the plans. If there are any questions, you can let us know. We'll have information for you for presentation or for voting on those on November the 7th. Dr. Healy is leading this process with the principals, and we are in process for year number 2 on that. Next year, we begin a whole new cycle, and they're rewritten and complete for next year. So that is occurring at this time.
Okay, before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I want to tell you, my fellow board members, and Ms. Helms, I remember at Monroe when we approved the calendar, you asked some very interesting questions to me about the school calendar this year. I'm going to be serving on the school calendar with Dr. Faust committee, and some of the questions you asked, I thought that would have been good to have heard at the calendar committee. So if y'all have any input to give me to take, I will be your representative at that committee.
Well, I did have something, but I think Dr. Houlihan was checking into this. Your data studies on the year-round schedule, do you feel that you will have information that you will want to share with the calendar committee or the curriculum or full board in their time frame?
Possibly. Still working with Mr. Bowers on that data request and evaluating kind of where we are with, keep in mind 3 out of the 4 of our year-round schools right now for the first time in 6 years are getting additional funds to bring back their neediest kids for tutoring. And it's hard for me to make that decision in terms of where we need to go until I've got evidence of success or not. And so I don't want to come back to you all prematurely. I want to make sure we've done our due diligence to evaluate that. So to be honest with you, I don't know if that's going to be a decision that we will ask the board to make this year for the following year, because I certainly would not want to end something or change something if we are now investing in it much differently and are getting better results, but that we're too early.
Dr. Houlihan, if nothing else, I'm a sort of a fan of it. How is the teacher morale at these 3 schools that do year round? They have a harder job. Do they like their breaks?
Based on my discussions with teachers last year, I mean, teacher morale and culture is different at all 4 of these schools. But from a teacher morale perspective, a lot of the teachers I've talked to like the year-round scheduling. They're also parents, and they are able to, in a lot of cases, bring their kids with them. The one thing that's kind of a change is because in 3 or 4 of these schools that were identified as low performing last year, and we're investing heavily into them, we're asking some teachers to come back and to tutor during their break. And yes, they're getting paid more, which is great, but they could be missing some of their break time, and they're stepping up to do that. So I would say it's probably about 50-50, or maybe 60-40. The majority of folks I've talked to kind of like the year-round schedule. But I would say that teachers that are teaching in a traditional school, not year-round, like that as well. It's just kind of what they've gotten used to.
I always remember that March burnout in traditional school when it seems like they moved Easter till November. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Aye.
you.